Hi, Stefano Molea here, San Diego criminal defense lawyer and partner at the law office of David P. Shapiro, where we help good people regain control of their future when charged with a crime. Does it make a difference which prosecutor gets assigned to your case? The answer to that is yes, but let me explain what I think makes more of a difference. That's who's next to you as you're fighting your case. Obviously, right? I'm a criminal defense lawyer, of course that's what I'm going to say. But let me explain what I mean by that. So, look, there are different types of prosecutors out there, right? Some are sort of like, they really take their cause very seriously. They think everybody that they encounter is an awful person and deserves to be punished. And then there's some others who understand that we're all humans, we make mistakes sometimes, or hey, you know what? I'm going to keep an open mind. I am going to look at this case and maybe this person is innocent. Maybe there is evidence that really brings into question whether or not, as a prosecutor, they can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And so, of course, there's going to be a huge spectrum of attitudes of prosecutors, of mentalities and philosophies on how they take their job or how they do their job. Now, of course, the reason why I say that having, the right criminal defense lawyer next to you is most important is because at the end of the day, right, what really everything boils down to is not necessarily what happened, right? And this is going to be tough for some people to hear. It's not really what happened, it's what can be proven. What can the prosecution prove beyond a reasonable doubt? So now it becomes a matter of understanding the law very well. It becomes a matter of making sure that there's a good grasp of the facts, that if there's an investigation needed to be done, that you know where to look to find things that could be helpful. So you have to have a very creative sort of approach to factually determining what happened in the case, aside from what just the client says and what the evidence says, right? So let's look beyond what things look like on the surface. Then from there, really it's being able to effectively argue why the facts do not support the elements, right? Or why it's just not beyond a reasonable doubt. And so being able to do that effectively is important because that's going to assess the leverage in a case. And more importantly, being able to communicate that to a prosecutor who may have blinders on when they're first viewing the case, or who may not have the perspective that, this other side has. So being able to communicate well is obviously going to be important, and understanding the law and being able to think creatively is very important. And then of course, it's your track record, right? What have you been able to do? What's your reputation? And how do people perceive you? And when I say how do people perceive you, how do they perceive you, we're talking about the person next to you who represents you, right? Your criminal defense lawyer. So how does your reputation sort of introduce you to the prosecutor? Because that also can have an effect on their reaction to you and reaction to the case, right? If they know that you're not going to do the work and that, you're not somebody who's going to make sure that you really hold them tight to their burden, then all right, they're just going to go about it, right? They're just going to go through it and they're not going to bring the attention they need to the case. Now, going back to the original question, okay? I've done enough to talk about why it's so important to have the right criminal defense lawyer next to you. But going back to the original question, yeah, look, having a prosecutor can make a difference. There's a criminal defense lawyer can do everything perfect. Just be the best criminal defense lawyer out there, follow everything, textbook-wise, be liked, be respected, have a great track record, know everything and do everything right. But sometimes if you have an unreasonable prosecutor, you're just going to continue to hit a wall, right? And that's whether it's deciding whether or not the case should go to trial, whether there is a reasonable resolution or outcome that should be reached, and their perspective on that can definitely make a difference on how the case goes. And so what do you do, right? What do you do? Well, that's where the sort of emotional intelligence of your criminal defense lawyer sort of makes a difference in some cases, right? How can your lawyer get them to just relax a little bit, right? Maybe get them to change their perspective. And look, sometimes that doesn't work either. And, if you have the respect to take it up to a supervisor, that's sometimes important. Other times, there's some other strategies that I'm not going to necessarily discuss now, but there's some strategies that you can put into place to, wait it out, so to speak, and see what happens. But ultimately, there are situations where, we can then get a judge involved, right? And there's certain situations where a judge can sort of override the unreasonableness of a prosecutor and then we get back to, what judge you're going to be in front of, etc. And I'm going to actually do a video on the importance of having the right judge, how important is it, etc. So check that out as well. Anyways, hope that this discussion is helpful. Hope it provides a decent perspective on the question of whether or not it's important to the outcome of your case what prosecutor is assigned. If you have any questions, of course, leave them in the comments or feel free to give us a call. Law Office of David P. Shapiro. Again, my name is Stefano Molea. Phone number here is 619-295-3555.